Hey listeners, did you know that YogiTriathlete offers endurance coaching for body and mind? We offer personalized training plans for endurance sports, wellness and mindset, nutrition and recovery guidance, and race preparation and strategy, all within the supportive community of Team YogiTriathlete. So if you're ready to conquer your fitness goals and push your limits, our endurance coaches are ready to guide you on the journey to peak performance. Go to YogiTriathlete.com today to set up your free 30-minute discovery call and embrace a future of strength, stamina, and achievement. Your goals, our experience, the perfect match for unstoppable success.
I like that you mentioned too that it's important to recognize the bad feelings or the panic, because you shouldn't ignore it. It's recognize it. Okay, I see you. I know what's happening. And now I'm going to move forward, because if you don't, then it's just, toxic positivity, essentially. You need to feel, but you don't want to get stuck in the spiral either.
Welcome to the Yogi Triathlete podcast. We are your hosts, Jess and BJ, and today we're sharing the mic with Dandelion Dullvio-Scott, ultrarunner, alpinist, and coach. We were connected with Dandelion after I reached out to Squirrel's Nut Butter founder, Chris Thornley, about anyone he'd recommend amongst our fellow SNB Adventure teammates to interview following the Cocodona 250, which Dandelion recently completed in 105 hours, 28 minutes, and 27 seconds. Like many of you, we were glued to the coverage and we knew we wanted to get some firsthand recaps of this massive race. The Cocodona 250 is a point-to-point foot race that takes the runners from Black City Canyon to downtown Flagstaff, Arizona, after a grueling final climb over Mount Elden. Cocodona has more than 40,000 feet of vertical gain and 34,000 feet of loss over the 250 miles. From her mountaineering roots, Dandelion stepped into trail racing in 2018 with her first Fast Pack event and has accumulated countless miles and finishes over the years. But Cocodona was her first race of the 200-mile flavor. We're so excited to dive in, and we're really grateful that she said yes. So without another moment going by, Dandelion, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
So people listening to that saying like, oh my, 250 miles and 34,000 feet of elevation, that would be considered extreme. So my first question is like, what have you been able to pinpoint what it takes to put yourself into that environment to do extreme things like that and get to the other side, get to that finish line? What do you think are some of the qualities?
I think curiosity is kind of the first and foremost thing that comes to mind. I mean, you have to you wonder if you have what it takes, and you have to be willing to take that risk, because maybe you don't, and you want to find out. And so you just, curious about your limits. I also just kind of chosen suffering. I think that in daily life, we go through all sorts of things that we don't want to go through necessarily. And choosing to go through suffering gives us tools to help us through those moments where we're suffering and we don't want to be there. So, yeah, I think those are the two major things that kind of give you what it takes.
And I was reading in your bio on your coaching page that I think it was in your bio. It could have been another article that I read, that you love training at altitude on technical trails and running in extreme environmental conditions.
Yes,
that's essentially what you were just describing. What is it about that? Is it to just see how you respond, how you keep moving forward? Like, what is one level deeper on that curiosity button that now makes this like a highlight of things that you experience in your life and want to experience more of?
I have an environmental studies background. I was actually a park ranger, and I have a deep interest in ecology and just, being out there and experiencing the land. So when I run in these extreme environments, it's not about conquering the terrain for me. It's about learning to move with it all. So like I really love running in snow, for example. And snow isn't just snow. It's very different every day. Sometimes it's like mashed potatoes. Sometimes it's icy. Sometimes it's powdery. Sometimes it's really cold. And then you come out of the shade and suddenly you're really warm. And I really like learning to adapt to all those changes and just move with it. Like, all the other animals in the environment that just move with the land.
And Mother Earth is, she's a living organism of resilience and ability to adapt and to be destroyed and to grow again. And do you tap into those energies of nature when you're out there? Do you feel aligned with those?
I think so. I mean, that's why I like, to go to the extreme places part of it also is just being as far away as possible from civilization, because that's where I feel most me. I've always been like that. I can't remember a time when I didn't love the outdoors. When I was little, all I did was like, I want to catch frogs. I want to catch snakes. Like, I just loved it. Getting dirty, playing in the mud, flipping over rocks and trying to find the exact technique to catch a salamander. Because, by the way, every salamander requires a different technique to catch, which I learned from when I was like 6. So again, it's that, maybe it's also that attention to detail as well, because, the more attuned you are and in tune with the landscape around you, the better you can adapt and respond to the changes. Because what you don't want to do is react. When we react, it's very like, it's a stressful response, and it's like, you don't think, you just like, it's not really inducive of anything good. But when you respond, there's a thought process. Okay, this is the situation or the problem. How am I going to deal with this and move forward, even though I have to, manage this problem or this different terrain, this cliff, whatever it is.
Yeah. So the reaction is the thing that gets us all indulging in like the catastrophic now, the panic. But instead we're like, well, let's just take a look at what we can do. And that there's a space there, there's a gap there, and there's space. Have you always had that space? And if someone's like, I can't do that, I react all the time, how did you develop the space of being able to respond versus react?
I'm actually a very high anxiety person, and I get stressed out very easily, and I didn't like being like that. It's not fun. I mean, it's quite terrible. So it was a very much learned behavior for me, and I think that. So I originally was an alpinist and a rock climber, and that was a great way for me to escape stress and anxiety, because when you're hanging off the rock face, like, you need to be present. Every move, every detail, so present in that moment. It's a great escape from everything else. But in running, it's different for me. I feel like I have to be very focused in the moment, in the problem solving, in the whole process of it all, not just that one move on the wall. And so just looking at things more logically through running and through racing has just naturally kind of become part of who I am in my daily life. And so now I don't, like, I'll catch myself and like, oh no, I'm panicking. I'm like, no, let's take the step back. Let's look at the situation and let's think of a solution instead of just freaking out about it. And so it's a habit now, but I wouldn't say it's my natural state.
And I'm sure it doesn't negate anxiousness coming up, but it allows you to respond in the way that you want to move forward, as opposed to getting wrapped up in those anxious thoughts. Yeah, I think we can all relate to that. And that, feelings of like anxiousness or fear or whatever it is that we're walking in life with, these experiences, when we do train ourselves, to get into this habit of responding, it's like it doesn't negate those things, but it equips you where they don't have such a hold on you, where, we can really move into like that paralysis and then kind of like fall in our mental state. So I love how you describe that. You trained yourself, which is, I think, anyone who's got that space between stimulus and response, like it is the result of just training our minds in whatever way resonates with us. There's many different ways to train the mind. But I think it's such an important thing is that you recognize, like, I don't want to feel like this. So what can I do? Getting into that solution mode.
And I like that you mentioned too, that it's important to recognize like the bad feelings or the panic, because you shouldn't ignore it. It's recognize it. Okay, I see you. I know what's happening. And now I'm going to move forward. Because if you don't, then it's just, toxic positivity, essentially. You need to feel, but you don't want to get stuck in the spiral either.
I love this. Yeah. I love this conversation already. That's so good. And I think it's kind of setting us up, unless you had something more on that.
I was going to say, these races, these long distance races are actually like, they're tests for you, or I see them as tests to kind of see, to take a temperature gauge of where I'm at in the process of being able to shift on the fly to solution versus, panic. I always feel like they're testing me. They're really putting the practice, because you can read a book and do a test, and yeah, that's great. But you actually have to like immerse yourself in a race experience, which no race is the same. Even the same race that you attend every year is not the same. Mm-hmm. Do you see it as that?
I do. And I really like that you point that out. Like last year, Cocodona was warmer. So different experience. And I have done 200s, the same race, different years, totally different than the year before. Like I was in this like really bad low for like 100K the second time I did it, and I thought I would be better the second time. So yeah, it's things like that. Like you never know what kind of day you're gonna have, what the weather is gonna do, what your body's gonna do that day. No matter how hard you train, things just happen. And that's kind of what makes these races exciting, because it is the unknown. And for me, that's the whole adventure part. I don't want to know the outcome. I want to just go out and find out what happens. And that's what's intriguing about the longer the race is. Like, I'm not going to do a 100-mile training run for a 100-miler. And I'm certainly not going to do a 200-mile training run for a 200-plus miler. So it's like really taking that unknown to a new level.
All right. Well, let's dive into the race then. So this is the third year of Cocodona, right?
This was the fourth year.
Wow. Okay. Fourth year. And as you just filled us in, what is the present state of the registration for 2025?
The race filled in 10 days. The registration opened noon, the day of the race. It filled 10 days later, and now there are more people on the wait list than there are spots in the race.
That's awesome. And how smart of Aravaipa, now that I think of this, like it typically registration opens after the race, but they do it during the race. They've got all of us glued to Instagram because we're loving what's happening. And Aravaipa is so great at like their broadcasting and their coverage. They've just taken like trail racing to a whole new level with that. I mean, that's just brilliant. That's so awesome. And I'm so excited for all the people who are acting on this inspiration, So
I will tell you a funny backstory is I was either the first or second person to register for this event, the 2024 event. I registered right after it was announced. And my pacer registered right after it was announced for next year.
Yes. Oh, that's so great. So now, are you?
Good thing you didn't wait.
Yes.
Are you going back, or are you going to be your pacer's pacer?
I am going to be my pacer's pacer. So I am going back, and I'm going to experience the other side, which I think is actually more difficult. I think that as an athlete, I had the easier job than my crew. quite honestly.
Yeah. Logistical wise, like all the logistics and details that go into this like 105-hour event.
Yeah. I mean, so like going into that, like just as an athlete, all you have to do really is just move forward. It's quite simple, actually. I mean, there's times where it really sucks, but it's actually a very simple existence out on the trail, which I love. The crew, on the other hand, is making all my decisions. I think after the first day, I can't remember a single decision I made for myself. I was told when to eat, when to sleep, when to move, when to run, when to sit. Like, they did it all. And they have to remember, like, kind of read me the whole time and know what I need and know my personality and know how to motivate me. And I mean, that's a really hard job, and a very stressful job because they don't want to, mess it up. And I had the most amazing crew. I am convinced without these specific people on my team, I would not have finished this race. So I am so grateful to all of them.
Oh,
tell us who you're crowd. Give them a shout out.
Yeah,
let's hear about this amazing team.
Give them a little bit of love. Who was on your crew and why did you choose them?
So first was my husband, Damien. Pretty obvious. I chose him because he's my husband, and I love him, but he is also an ultra runner. And I mean, and as my husband, like, quite honestly, he knows me the best. He knows all my little quirks, all those little details, and like the tone of my voice or a glance or something. So, he was a very obvious choice. My second would be Luke, who is the pacer that signed up for next year immediately. He's my friend, and he's also an athlete I coach. Really like crusher ultra runner. We called him the drill sergeant. He was he's strict, but it's all from a very good, kind place. And he knew how to get me going, and we think very similar. So that was great. And then we had Zach, who is a rep for one of my sponsors, Ultra Aspire. And he's another multi-sport athlete. So he very much understood like that aspect of me, and just great conversationalist to just distract me whenever I was not happy about life. And then Jess and Byron are the RDs for a really cool new ultra that I'll plug. It's called City of Rocks Ultra. It's in Idaho, and it's really cool. It's a combined human and horse endurance event. So as we know, ultra running, or the 100-mile distance, was originally a horse race. And then Gordy's horse came up lame, and he was like, oh, I guess I'll just run it. And so that's the birth of the 100-miler. So they took that idea and made it all into one event, which is really cool. And Byron had never run more than 12 miles. And then he last minute paced me 17 miles. So couch to 17 miler is what we say now.
So great. When is that? Oh, I'm sorry. More on the crew?
And I mean, Jess just kind of kept the boat going. I mean, yeah, she was probably the most organized person on that team. And yeah, I can't imagine doing any of it without any of them. All different personality types, but all great teamwork. And that the different personality types too are really important, because bringing something new to the table, to, have the diversity. But I think you're asking when that race is. It's actually next weekend. Oh. And there is last minute registration. You can register day up, I believe. So.
Oh, cool. Well, we'll find it online, and we'll put a link in the show notes so people can check it out for the future as well. All right. So let's dive into the race. Going into it, let's even say like the morning of, and just being on the start line. Take us through that experience. What's that like, knowing this massive, vast unknown is ahead, and then that known of all you have to do is keep moving?
I probably wasn't as nervous as I should have been. I had been planning on doing this race for 2 years. So it was kind of surreal to like, oh, and here I am, actually on the start line. But I was pretty calm. Like, it was just like, I think I talked myself into like having the mindset of, it's just another race. You know how to race. You've done this before, just longer, but you've done this process before. So that was kind of just my internal voice. And then, gun went off 10 minutes late, which is, kind of common. You have to be ready for anything in races, and that's what makes it exciting again, that unknown thing. And I just kind of stuck with my game plan more than anything. I was really confident in just the plan and, what my coach and I had talked about. So my big focus was, don't go out too fast. Just play this the way you want to play it. Don't get sucked in. So, and I was racing it, as in I was trying to podium. So I was actually kind of excited when all these like really high level women passed me, because I was like, good, let them go, do your thing, don't chase them. I was just trying to do my thing, because I don't really like, when I compete, I don't really think of me being against people. I'm just trying to do the best I can, and where that lands me, it lands me. So I was thinking more about a time than like actually like being against anyone. So I just let people pass me. It was like, good, you're doing good. You're letting people go. And I kind of, I don't know, congratulated myself every time I let someone pass. I don't know. But that was kind of my system that first day. And the first day was probably my best day. I come from a mountain background, and so it's like, oh, rocky vert. Okay. And I don't mean that in an arrogant way. It's just a terrain that I train on all the time. This like rolly rocks on a Jeep road. It's just, for me on that terrain, it's just about even breathing. I just like decide I want my breath in this pattern, and I'm going to take a pace that allows the breath to be this way. And I don't worry about anything else. And then I don't know if I got lucky, but I felt like I was in the shade a lot. I don't know if the shadows followed me at my specific pace or something. But I did feel like I was always in the shade, and the wind really helped. And I come from Wyoming, and it's really windy all the time. So having the wind was like, oh, I do this all the time. So it was something familiar. That was nice. And yeah, it was just one foot in front of the other, and just not caring what everyone else did.
I was going to say that's a very pivotal point in racing, especially early on, is not to get carried away in the event or the emotion or the adrenaline or the freshness or the race environment, but to hold back and stay true to you. And so I think a lot of athletes, it sounds like you had this dialed in. Maybe there was a small battle in the mind, but I feel like a lot of athletes battle with that. But I'm racing, so I need to go, but I need to hold back because that's the plan. And then they would say, well, how do I know? How do I know when to go and when not to go? And so that is when you're going to experience when to go and not to go. You're going to know in the moment, and you have to be okay with whatever choice you make. But it sounds like you stood firm with, this is the plan. Hold way, way back. Just let them go. But was there any I gotta get moving?
Oh yeah. Like there's the ravine that we went up. It was kind of like a little scrambly, and I really like scrambly stuff, and I wanted to move in that. Luckily, it was a little too crowded in there, so it was kind of a built-in system for me to kind of calm down. And yeah, I by no means am the perfect athlete. I have all those same problems. And, I try to, my method usually is, okay, if I'm going to go out, I'm going to have all these, nerves of excitement and all these feelings and just like the race energy. And I do think it's okay to give myself like 10, 15 minutes to maybe go a little too fast, so to speak, but just to work that out. The thing is, you have to pull it back in time for it to not become a problem, because I don't like 10, 15 minutes. I mean, it's probably not going to hurt you unless you like go out at some RPE 10 interval pace. I mean, but if you stay in that for like an hour,
Mm-hmm.
that's when, and you don't leave that space. I think that's the problem.
I love that. It's like you're like a child. You got to just like get it out. Like you're just like, oh, I got to just like get this out, like work it out, and then but bring
like,
yourself
get it out of your system, and then it's over, and move on.
Yeah, it's so true. And I think the awareness, like what you're talking about, when the athlete doesn't pull it back, they just keep going. I feel so great. This is awesome. But it's so early. It's so early in the race. Like you've got a while to go. You can't let it rip.
Yeah. And I mean, and I don't mean anything, of course, bad against the athletes that went out faster than me. It's just not my particular style. I'm not the type of person that likes to be in the front right off the bat. I prefer to just hang back and let things unfold. And like I said, I end up where I end up. For some people, it works. They like to be in the front right away and stay in the front. And there's nothing wrong with that at all. It's just not me.
So how does like night one, take us through like 2 and 3? I mean, we're talking 105 hours. So what is it, like 4 days?
So long.
I've never tried 24 by that many before.
I'm going to be very honest. There are some significant blank spots in my memory that I've had filled in here and there, but sometimes I get it a little mixed up. So I'm going to do my very best.
Perfect.
So getting to Whiskey Row, for me, like that night, I never have had problems at night in 100-miler. That's a 100-miler. I have not had a problem at night, and I really enjoy night running. And as a benefit, I didn't have to deal with big, scary things like grizzly bears and moose on this course. So yay, scorpions instead. So I teamed up with a couple of different people. We were just moved, like talk together, and then, eventually it's silence, but you're still like together. It's companionship. Okay, we're in this tonight together. We don't need to talk the whole time. Eventually, like talking is it's extra energy because you're thinking and you want to save all that thinking. But it's nice to not be alone. So I kind of just did that throughout the night. In Prescott or nearing Prescott, I remember getting confused about the trails a few times, and I had to take out my phone and make sure I was on the right way. So I remember I think I was just tired. So I was just more getting frustrated about it, but I got back on the trail and it was fine. Then finally got to my crew at Prescott and had my first pacer, Luke. And I was, my legs were kind of tired, but it still had that kind of 100-mile feel. I was like mile 78. The interesting thought I had was, I would only have 22 miles to go under a normal circumstance. Wouldn't that be nice? But no. But I had less than 200 miles to go too. So, see, whenever there's a negative thought, but there's always some positive way to spin it. So that's kind of how I try to work it when I have those thoughts. But anyway, so ran with Luke through the Dells, which was all like the slick rock area by the lake, which was really beautiful at sunrise. I remember I felt like my knees were getting kind of banged up just from impact. I think because I ran so long with the heavy vest, because there's that 4-liter minimum water carry that first day. And I took 5 liters with me, and I fast pack with the heavy vest, but I've never like when you fast pack, you don't run as fast. And it's like more spread out, like 70-mile fast pack. Well, that's like 2 days. That's not, less than 24 hours. So just that high intensity of going down the hills, I think kind of got to my joints a bit. But just KT taped it and it worked out just fine. But now it gets blurry. So then there was this, I knew I wanted to, my plan was I was going to sleep the first night if I was tired. And I wasn't at Whiskey Row. And then I attempted to sleep at Iron King. And I laid in the back of the SUV for like 10 minutes, couldn't fall asleep. So we moved on. Then I ran with Damien to Fane Ranch. At Fane Ranch, I was able to fall asleep. So this was late morning. So I slept for about an hour and then got up, and then I was running with Luke again. And this is kind of the first problem I had with the heat and the sleep deprivation. And I heat trained. I live in Wyoming, which is not exactly summer. In late April, early May, I believe it snowed 2 days before the race, actually, where I live. But I was heat training in a sauna, and I traveled to Utah a lot just to get a lot of heat exposure in those deserts. But when you are short on sleep, your body has a problem maintaining equilibrium. So all those adaptations, I had them, but I still struggled with the regulation just because I didn't have the energy to regulate, basically, without the sleep. So climbing up to Mingus, things just started to slow down for me. It was just like really warm. I was getting really tired. I kept taking, like, I need 10-minute dirt naps. So there's great pictures of me just like collapsed on the ground with my hat on my face in the dust, just like passed out. It's actually quite amazing. I don't even remember taking all these naps, but apparently there is a lot of them. So, I mean, I was still moving well. It just wasn't at the most efficient pace that I had previously been running. And then at Mingus, when I finally got there, I had 3 plates of lasagna, which still just cracks everybody up. But it was Michelin star lasagna. So I know I had to take advantage of that. And I was eating a lot of gels for nutrition throughout the race. But I was really capitalizing at the aid stations, which is new for me. Usually I only eat the food I bring, and I don't really eat solid food. But 200 plus miles, I think that really capitalizing on the aid station food and eating real food is so important. And you're not, especially later in the race, you're not blasting out of there. You're gonna walk a little or power hike or jog, so you don't have the same GI distress that you would have, like, had I done that at mile 70 and Run Rabbit Run, eating 3 lasagnas. I don't think I I think there might have been a problem. But in this situation, it was fine. So, and then Zach paced me. That's right around sunset. So this is now going into night 2. So then Zach paced me, and I remember I almost snapped at him for no reason a few times. I was starting to get that crankiness. That's so fun. And again, why things are so miserable for the crew, because they have to deal with the cranky runner who doesn't care what they say and how mean they're being. But I managed to not actually say things. I just stopped talking. And it was kind of rough, that section. It was technical downhill, which I normally really love, but I just didn't have the energy to kind of bounce around in the rocks down that hill, especially in the dark. I think my reaction time was kind of slowing down. Like, you see the rock and you process the rock, and then you move over the rock. But that thing that happens to me in less than a second normally was just taking more time. So yeah, it was better to kind of take it easy, take it slow. And eventually, Zach and I just started talking, and the miles just started to click by really quick, which is nice. Then I got to Jerome, and I was really tired, and Damien took over. And then I got to experience what it's like to sleep while you're running, because it was pretty hilarious. I told my husband, Damien, you have to keep me awake. Tell me stories. He's like, you know all my stories. What do I do? I'm like, oh yeah, when you run with your spouse, you know everything. There's nothing new. So he was like trying to just talk to me as much as he could. And I would go up right behind him and look down at his feet and try to match his stride precisely. Because again, you're limiting thought. So if I'm just copying someone, I'm not making my own decisions. So it sounds really silly, but someone's walk pattern, it's a decision I don't have to make. But the problem is looking down would shut my eyelids halfway. And they would like just continue to shut. And I would see like the colors would change to be like techno colors. It was quite entertaining. And I knew it was happening. I'm like, oh, I'm about to start falling asleep again. And I would literally like, my eyes would close. I'd still be moving, and I'd like shake my head and like wake myself up and be like, oh my God, I fell asleep walking again. And then there was one point Damien wanted to check the map, make sure we were on the right path. He's like, oh, just lay down for a second. And 30 seconds later, he came back and I was passed out. He said I looked like a corpse in the middle of the road. I was just like spread out, looking at this like face up. It was pretty freaking crazy. I don't even remember it, but he vividly does.
What mile are you at this point? You think?
I can tell you because I have everything written down. So that would be like 130.
Okay. My God.
Wow.
So just for context, you have, yes, less than 200 to go, but you have 100 and more than halfway there. That would be the good spin. But 120 miles to go. Right? At that point,
yeah, it's like I got to do this all over again.
Yeah,
basically.
that's a wild thing to, I mean, you can't, and at that point, your brain's not even going to try and comprehend anything like that. It's just keep moving forward.
Right. And I mean, here's the thing. Miles are miles, no matter what kind of math you do with it. Like I'm halfway, I'm a quarter of the way, I have this much more. No matter how you spin it, the miles are there. You got to do them. So the mileage during this race, I never really thought about it because, and this is how I approach hundreds. I mean, it doesn't matter if I'm happy about it or sad about it or annoyed about it or, they're there and I got to do it. So there's no reason to spend the energy thinking about it when it is inconsequential.
That's a good mindset. That's a pretty powerful, to kind of disassociate yourself with that. Like you're just got to get through it.
Yeah. Like it's not personal.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, it's like they say aid station to aid station too, for that very reason. You don't want to think of this big number. You want to think of the steps in between that are attainable. And I mean, that's what I was doing. I was just like, I took a step. Excellent. Now I just have to take a lot more, but each step is not that hard. So, it's all just ways to not intimidate yourself and psych yourself out and just keep everything just simple. It's just miles. I run miles all the time. Every week I run miles. No big deal. That's what I told myself.
No big deal. So do you ever it sounds like you remained standing when you were falling asleep running, but did you ever get like a more substantial nap, or did the body come around, or did you stay kind of that fatigued the whole way?
So after this section, I took another hour or hour and a half. Between an hour and 2 hours. It's kind of fuzzy. I don't remember everything. But I did take, I came into the aid station and Damien's like, she needs to get in the car. Don't feed her. Don't do anything. Just get her in the car and let her pass out. She just, no. So that's exactly what happened. Like, I got in the car and I remembered nothing. So yeah. And then I like woke up the next morning, basically. So I slept during that kind of bewitching hour. So like the idea was let her sleep the rest of the night and then it will feel like, she woke up in the morning, which is a technique that sometimes we use for sleep deprivation during a 200. It's like giving you the illusion of a circadian rhythm.
It totally makes sense. That totally, yeah. I was curious about that. Did you feel when you woke up in the morning, did you feel like, yeah, all right, let's go? Or was it like...
No.
I was like, that was a little enthusiastic.
No. And it's funny because I actually wake up around 4 a.m. every day, feeling like really excited to like get going. I did not feel this way on day 3. I was pretty, I was like, wow, the sleep deprivation thing's not great. But I didn't feel terrible either. I felt much better than I had, when I had gone to sleep. So yeah, got up and started moving towards Sedona. And this was kind of the point in the race where I was like, decided I wasn't competing anymore. And I wasn't worried about time or any of those like things that you think about when you're being competitive. I was just like, you know what? I compete because I want to have another a layer to push myself even harder. Because, I could finish the race, but let's see how I could do if I really like tried extra hard. Turns out a 200 plus is hard by itself. So I was like, maybe I don't need that layer this time. Maybe we could just focus on survival. So, kind of went, and I kind of just let the race like switch from racing to running. And that was pretty easy for me because or at least I remember it being relatively easy. I don't think I mourned that at all. When I started doing ultras, I always just ran to finish. Racing is pretty new to me. I've only been really doing that for a year and a half, 2 years now. So I just kind of reverted back to, nope, we're on an adventure run now. And it did remove like pressure because now we weren't looking at where's everyone else on the course and all that. Or the team wasn't anyway. I don't like to know where anyone is. They were keeping tabs. So yeah, this day was the worst low I've ever experienced in my life. So this was going to Sedona. This was very hot. I was doing this all in the heat of the day, during the day. And I was with Luke all day long, and he was saying all sorts of fun things like, if you move faster, I won't make you eat another gel. Give me 5% more. And I'm like, what's 5%? I have no idea what you're talking about. But the big thing that happened to me was it was about 80 degrees and I was cold. Like, I needed to stop. I needed my puffy. I needed my pants. And I've had heat exhaustion before, and I knew this was not good. I was very coherent. And I was like, oh, this is not, no, you don't wear a puffy in the middle of the desert, in May in the sun. Like, this is just not how you're supposed to feel. So my body basically just kind of shut down. It was like, no, you're really tired and we're just not going to function the way we're supposed to. So now you're cold, even though it's hot. So when we got to the water station, and the water station, I'm not sure what mile that was, maybe a mile 160 maybe. But, I laid down in the shade with my puffy on, with my pants on, and the volunteer was like, oh my God, is that a runner? Do you need a medic? Because there was none there. We could call a medic for her. And he's like, not yet. And so we went a little further, and I kept trying to take naps in the shade. And we didn't go far off the trail because, you don't want to take extra steps. But the problem was the 125-mile distance was just released, and now they were coming by, and they were trying to be very kind and say, hey, are you okay? but I was trying to sleep. So every 2 minutes, someone would ask if we were okay, and I couldn't sleep. So that made things a little challenging. So then we were like, okay, I think we need to take the extra steps. So we went off the trail, and then we had a discussion about how to proceed. So we didn't want to stay. The concern was me having this heat exhaustion develop into something very serious. But if we waited for it to get cooler out, if I didn't improve, then I might have a hypothermia issue when night came. So we talked about it, and then we remembered that we had the bivvies, which work very well, those foil bivvies. So the decision was made, we're going to stay here in the shade for about an hour and a half, and wait for things to cool down. And then I'm going to move again. And hopefully I'll be faster. Because even if I had kept moving, maybe I would have gotten to Sedona at the same time, but I would have been in worse shape with the exposure and the heat. So it was better to just rest and take that chance of moving a little faster in the cool. And if I couldn't do it, well, then we would take the bivvies out and call a medic or something like that. It was kind of a last-ditch effort. And meanwhile, my crew was like, oh my God, she might have to DNF. Who's going to tell her? So that was their conversation.
And how did it work? How were you able to get, I mean, this is pretty significant.
Pivotal, yeah.
Piece of your experience. Obviously you were able to get your body temperature somewhat regulated. Could you feel that, like that you were a little bit more balanced?
I didn't need the puffy anymore. Like when I was in the shade, I took the puffy off, and as soon as we started to move again, an hour later, I mean, I wasn't going to break records with my pace, but I wasn't fine, but I was certainly functional, and I wasn't having these temperature issues anymore. So we got into Sedona like right after sunset, and I was told, we are taking you off course. We're going to take your spot tracker off, and we're going to put you in a tent. I sleep better in tents than in a bed. I'm really weird. So I was taken to a tent off course. They put me in there, and they're like, you're going to bed for 6 hours. You're doing a full reset. And if you need 7 hours, you'll get 7. I'm like, okay. Like I said, not making decisions anymore for myself. So yeah, I just passed out, had pretty much almost a full night's sleep. I slept for 7 hours, and they brought me back on the course. And that's when one of my pacers, Zach, it was worked out that he was going to help another ultra aspire athlete. And while I was sleeping, and that Byron was going to be my next pacer. And he was the one who had never run 17 miles before. So total reset, new pacer, new me. So woke up in the morning, and I was like, okay, let's go. And we just ran. I did feel completely a normal person again. I was jumping over the rocks. I was running uphill. I was really excited about the big river crossing because the water felt really good on my legs. I was just happy. I was like, oh, I feel like a runner again. This is excellent. So yeah, and that's kind of how that day went. That fourth day. It went well until night. Then I started to feel not so great again.
So there's this section where you're coming into Flagstaff, and I don't know if you hit that at night or whatever, and you're in this field or meadow, and you can see Mount Elden. And I don't know how close when you get to the other side of Elden, how close it is to the finish, but that seems to be just even from footage and photos that people have put up about their experience. You see kind of this gorgeous field, and then this massive mountain that you have to overcome to get to the finish line. Was that something that you experienced that night, or did you go into day 5?
That was day 5. So the night was going into Walnut, and I had a little bit of hypothermia. So I actually cuddled with my husband in the bivvy to stay warm. And I I was just exhausted from the whole experience, but he knew how to kind of get me into like this warrior mode where I just kind of was annoyed, frustrated, angry, and then, no, we're doing this, kind of the responding thing we talked about earlier. So that kind of got me into Walnut. I took an hour and a half break, and then I guess it was early morning when I left, and then I felt amazing again. And that's the scene that you're describing is when you leave Walnut and go toward Elden, you're just going through these like really cool, like rolling meadows, and you could see the mountain, and it's like really cool because like, oh, like that's like literally the last thing. And you kind of get to, or I just enjoyed that whole approach experience. And, as an alpinist, I have that background and I was like, it was familiar. Like I'm approaching a mountain. I've done this before so many times. So, and then in climbing it, like, it was like day one. I was like, I feel great. I'm climbing a mountain. I do this all the time. I just focused on my breath. And yeah, I was like, I looked at him like, oh, this is like, okay, about how many climbs is this to my main crag? Because getting to my crag by my house was 350 feet. So I was like, okay, I just have to do that a couple of times. That's how I broke it down. And then it's just descending, which I love to do anyway.
How far from the base of Elden when you come down like to the finish line? Is it just like a few miles? I don't know. I'm curious about what that distance is because it seems like Mount Elden is like this significant thing of like, yes, you're like gonna finish.
So from the summit of Elden to Flagstaff, is what you're asking? That's about 8 miles. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like 8 miles. Yeah. Wow. So I mean, in the great scheme of things, that's nothing.
Wow. Yeah.
No. Wow. And it's a descent. So, and having watched the live stream, I'm like, oh my God, left on birch. I'm doing it. It's like, hey, I've watched this over and over so many times, and now they're following me.
And how did the finish line feel?
It was kind of surreal. I was just faster and faster, and I think like I was told I sort of jumped across the finish line. But yeah, it was just a lot of things, I guess. It's like, and it wasn't me who did it. It was my entire team. And I mean, a lot of this race for me was just getting to hang out with this really awesome group of people and sharing it with them. Like, that's the biggest takeaway from me, more than the course itself, was just sharing it with them. So it's just cool to have them all there and experience it with me.
I saw you put out a post about, it was really beautiful how you were explaining, like, it's like there's a part of you that's like, wants to be back there where all you had to do was move forward and you were like bonding with this team. And then it's like, it's over. And then everybody disperses back to their life. And then you've got your life that you're living. How have you been, just navigating that space of between the finish line to where you are now?
If I'm being honest, I mean, I'm still kind of figuring that out. I was pretty depressed actually the week after the race, and a little bit the second week. This is now third week, so every week is kind of getting better as I guess I'm acclimating back into normalcy, whatever that means. I'll never be normal again now. But yeah, it's very jarring. Like, this is like your life is this trail. And then it's just like, okay, you're done. Go home. Take a shower. Oh my God. And then so there wasn't a lot of closure for me, I didn't, like, we left the next day, started to drive home the next day. So, and everyone kind of dispersed immediately. So I think part of it, I just didn't have like the closure I needed. And so I've been talking, with my crew a lot. I actually went climbing with Jess and Byron over the weekend, and, we all live, except for my husband, obviously, but we all live pretty far away from each other too. So, it's very odd to be so connected to these people, and then like you don't see them again, for a while. And like you also said, the simplicity of the trail. I mean, yeah, it's hard. It's very hard to be out there, but it's just one thing that you have to do. It's just go, just move forward and be part of this, be part of the land, like we talked about earlier. And you go home and there's bills and like, a lawn. You got to take the garbage out. You have to, it's just, just life stuff. It's not hard necessarily, but it's still complex. And I've always been the type of person that I really just love being in the backcountry for the very reason that it's simple. I just move forward. I eat. I, filter water. I sleep, and I do it again. It's the basics, and there's beauty in the basics.
Yeah, it sounds like that aspect brings you joy. That not the isolation, but the simplicity. Just like I just have to do one thing, and then we return, and we get this, with some of the athletes and myself too during these endurance events. You kind of feel like, okay, well, what's next? What's next? But there doesn't necessarily need to be something. What's next? It's like I'm still kind of like working through what I just did. It was just so impactful for me. It brought so much like up and out, and I actually was like the rawest I've ever been. Out there. What have you taken away from this experience besides, being with your community? What again have you proven to yourself or shown yourself that you can do?
So one thing that I don't know if it's surprising or not, I was bullied a lot when I was younger, because I was just, I don't know, I didn't fit into whatever mold I was supposed to. And one thing was I was actually always picked last in gym. And it's silly, but it's like, oh, okay, so maybe I am a good athlete, because I was able to finish this. So that's kind of like the little kid in me still. But, it's interesting too. I've always like the 100-mile distance has always been my distance. And now it's the middle distance for me, because now I've done 250. So 100, it's like, oh, it's like just half, less than half. So I think that moving forward in 100s, I'm a big believer in memories as being part of mental training. If you, do a really hard workout, in your preparation, and then you're experiencing a really difficult moment in a race, you can remember that workout and go, okay, this is hard, but I remember doing this, whatever workout it was, and it was really rough, but I got through it. So when I look at it that way, I'm like, okay, so my next 100-mile race is Tianaway 100 coming up in September. And I also have Never Summer 100K, which is even shorter. So when I do those shorter distance, quote unquote, middle distance races, now I can go, yeah, this is hard. I'm in a rough spot, but you know what? I got through Cocodona. So stop whining and this is not nearly as bad. Just go. I always have that now. So I think it's a nice little thing to have in the toolkit. And I'm not done with the 200-mile distance either. I'm not like jumping onto it next year. Obviously, the race is full. But I would like to go back to Cocodona again.
Nice. Beautiful. I love it. And, it like ends, and it ends abruptly. And I think the bigger and the longer it is, it's like that ending can feel even more abrupt. But what you were just talking about and explaining, it's like that is also a part of you now. Like every one of those miles, it's in your cells. And so you can use that stuff to your advantage as an athlete moving forward, because really, like we talked about at the beginning of this whole thing, it's like, it's not that because you did Cocodona 250, like you're not going to have any challenges that aren't going to challenge you. Like you're going to have equal challenges, whatever the distance, if you're doing 50 miles, 100 miles, or 250, but that you've got this now massive thing that you can use to your advantage and say, number one, yes, I am a pretty good athlete. And number two, like I've done this and I can do this for another 30 miles at this 100-miler. And yeah, it's a part of you now. All those miles and everything you've experienced, it's all brought you to here where you are today. And I think that was a beautiful way to just to sum it up. And I love that you're not done. So we'll see where when you enter into that 200-ish again.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. Hopefully my sleep strategy will be a little better this time.
Yeah. Well, I think, I mean, we gather knowledge. That's how, through experience, we gather knowledge. And then isn't that what keeps us coming back, right? It's like, well, now how can I apply this in a new way to these completely new circumstances? Even if it is still Cocodona 250, you're doing it again. Like it's still going to be a different race and a different experience.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Dandelion. We really appreciate. I love this story, and I've really been loving just following you. You're a beautiful writer, and the content you put up is beautiful and gorgeous. And so keep sharing because I've really enjoyed, just in this last week of being in touch with you, reading through some of your stuff and learning more about you. And I know our listeners are going to eat up this episode. So thanks for sharing so generously.
Well, thanks so much for inviting me on the podcast. I really enjoyed it.
And thank you, Chris, from Squirrel's Nut
Yes.
Butter.
Yes, nice. Thank you, Chris.
I know. He's the reason why we're all here.